Hi, welcome everyone. My name's Alan. I'm the registration manager for the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society. I'm just popping up early at the start of today's event just to say a massive thank you to everyone for tuning in with us today. I can see everyone still popping in as I speak. It's really great to see you. I want to do a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. I know we've all been doing a lot of Zoom over the past couple of months, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone who's maybe not been to a webinar format before knows what's up and what we're doing. So as I say, this is the webinar function on Zoom. So you'll be coming in with your video off and your microphone off. So don't panic if you're not used to that or you think something's gone wrong. It would be lovely to see you today, but we can see you in the chat function. So if you look just down at the bottom of your screen, slightly to the left of middle, there's the chat. What would be really nice there is, I know I'm missing a physical Fringe as much as anyone, and it's really nice to hear of anyone who's with us, where in the world you're joining us from, or just to say hello, just to give that sort of Fringe community spirit a little boost in this morning. I can tell you it is the most Edinburgh morning in the world. It's just started to lightly rain against my window. Finally, there's also a Q&A function that you'll see over to the right hand side. We're going to have a lovely session from our partners at Creative New Zealand today. I'm feeling it. It's so lovely that it feels really Fringe that we're crossing time zones and oceans today, bringing people together. So the Q&A function is just on the right hand side where you'll be able to submit a question that could go to some of the great artists that we're going to be hearing from today. So I think that's everything coming from me. I'm now going to throw to my favourite New Zealand export, the Fringe Society's own Amy Saunders.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everybody, or morning here, good evening for those of you who are tuning in from New Zealand. I'm just going to do a very quick welcome. It's lovely to see some familiar names appearing on the attendee list, and it's wonderful to see New Zealand here represented and to have Creative New Zealand with us this evening and this morning. Normally, as Alan said, we'd see you all here in the flesh, and as I said the other day, it's probably the most sober August that many of us have ever had. So we are enjoying that element, but on the whole, we're missing not having you all here. And I just wanted to acknowledge that the relationship that New Zealand and Creative New Zealand have had with the Fringe for many, many years, as well as artists and technicians and designers and across every strand, I guess, of our ecosystem. New Zealand has been well and truly embedded across the venues. So lovely to see some of you here. I think more than ever, building these international partnerships and relationships need our attention and our energy more than ever before. We're just saying that the hybrid of live and digital is here to stay. So we're looking forward to the live being back, but in the meantime, we will all learn to master the digital a bit more. So thanks for coming, and yeah, enjoy this session, and we will see you at the end.
Thank you, Amy and Alan. I ngā mana, I ngā reo, I ngā kārangatanga maha, tēnā koutou katoa. To all esteemed guests gathered in this webinar this morning, I extend warm greetings from Aotearoa New Zealand. My name is Dolina Wehipeihana, and I'll be facilitating today's conversation. On behalf of Creative New Zealand, Toi Aotearoa, the Arts Council of New Zealand, I'd like to welcome you to this panel discussion, Overcoming the Challenges of Distance. We'll hear from 4 of New Zealand's leading performing arts practitioners who will share some of the innovative ways they've been working with international collaborators and partners as a result of, but also well before, the changes that have impacted all of us as a result of COVID-19. I'll introduce our artists in a moment, but first I'd like to hand over to Jude Chambers, the manager of the International Services and Initiatives team at Creative New Zealand. This team's international kaupapa, or guiding principle, is one of kārangarua, or 2 voices, weaving exchange and engagement with international communities, including at Edinburgh over many years. Jude will say a few words before we begin. Kia ora, Jude.
Kia ora. Thank you, Dolina. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm about to say this evening, your morning, our evening. As Dolina mentioned, the work of the international team at Creative New Zealand is to support our artists to engage with their international peers and platforms and audiences through a variety of different activity. And our goal this year is a pretty simple one, really, and that's just to remain flexible and responsive to the extraordinary times. We want to encourage our artists to be continuing to engage beyond our shores and also to contribute to the global conversations that are happening at the moment around alternative modes of engagement. We've always believed that strong relationships are the foundation, whether it's about selling tours, commissioning new work, collaborations or exchange. It's all about relationships. So I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the relationships we have developed in Edinburgh and the relationships we've developed while in Edinburgh. Some truly remarkable opportunities have resulted for our artists and our practitioners. And as Amy mentioned, you know, broadly right into our community in a variety of different ways. And in that regard, I'd just like to acknowledge Edinburgh and in particular the Fringe as being a truly global connector. It really is, and we really value those relationships that we've developed. I'd like to acknowledge our colleagues at the Fringe. Excuse me. Thank you for being so brave and for stepping into this online environment to ensure that we continue to connect. It's not an easy thing to do, but you've done it. And we're very proud to be taking part of this in this forum. I'd like to particularly thank our colleague Amy Saunders. She has been a critical part of New Zealand's journey into Edinburgh and continues to be alongside our artists, including the four that we will be talking with this evening. So thank you, Amy. We really do appreciate it. As for our artists, well, they all have very different practices, but they do share a couple of things in common. They all share an interest in Edinburgh. They're all deeply committed to international engagement, and they're all working in very interesting ways, in different ways, to overcome the challenges of distance. So I'm sure you will enjoy hearing from all of them. But finally, just quickly, a real thank you to our colleagues here in New Zealand at PANS and the team at Auckland Live. We couldn't have brought this event, this conversation to this platform without you. So ngā mahi nui, thank you. So over to the artists.
Kia ora, Jude, thank you very much. Joining us on today's session is the Artistic Director of A Slightly Isolated Dog, Leo Jean Peters, live artist and performance maker, Julia Croft, choreographer and artistic director of Foster Group, Sarah Foster-Sproull, and writer, performer, musician, director and producer of Teakuppa Productions, Jamie McCaskill. And we're really looking forward to having a conversation with you about licensing, creative developments at a distance, international collabs and co-commissions and Indigenous collaborations. And we'd love to hear from you during the panel. So if you have any questions, please just enter them into the Q&A and I can ask our panelists following their initial presentations. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker this morning, Leo Jean Peters. Leo's company, A Slightly Isolated Dog, premiered at Assembly at the Edinburgh Fringe in 2018. And as a result of seasons at the Fringe, they have licensed a production with a company in China, with whom the company now has an ongoing relationship. Here is a video snippet of their production, Jekyll and Hyde, which came to Edinburgh in 2019.
My name is Mr. Hyde.
Building and punched that cleaning lady.
Can I empty your bins? And then he went to a bagpipist in the Wellington waterfront. And then he shot a commuter in the kneecap.
I am on my way to work. And he kicked a wood pigeon.
Nothing, no, but pleasure.
Yes, they are protected. Not from Mr. Hyde.
Leo Jean Peters has worked as a professional director and theatre creator for the last 20 plus years. Leo created A Slightly Isolated Dog, and in recent years, Leo has been building a trilogy of works that explore theatre and storytelling as a celebratory event, a party in the theatre. Jekyll and Hyde and Don Juan are two of these works. The third is currently being developed online through an interactive virtual process and series of virtual performance events. Welcome, Leo.
Thank you, Dolina. Kia ora koutou. My name is Leo Jean Peters. I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas, in the United States. I've lived in Wellington for the most part, in Wellington, New Zealand for the last 18 years, I think, since 2002. We formed A Slightly Isolated Dog in 2005, 2006, somewhere back then, fresh out of drama school, and wanting to make theater that didn't look like theater. It was basically the big thing. So we made a bunch of work for a while, and then we came across, in 2015, we built Don Juan for the first time. And then in 2016, we built Jekyll and Hyde. And this was the beginning of this sort of new area of work for us. And like a brief overview of the work, it's 5 fake French clowns or fake French performers that basically tell you how beautiful you are for about an hour. And then they tell you classic tales alongside this. So we tell the story of Don Juan or the story of Jekyll and Hyde. But we get audience members to play with us as we do it. When I say like audience participation, and everybody that I know in the theater industry like cringes madly and sort of spits at it, because we feel the same way about what we hear about with audience participation. But the purpose of the work is really about bringing a kind of joyous celebration of basically how ridiculous and sort of messed up our lives are. And we have these beautiful kind of like performers that are very charming, and they're very, very pleasurable to be with. And they kind of make a joyous event out of the whole theatrical experience. So some ways we describe it as like we build family, is the attempt of every show really, is like to build a little family in the theater. And in this way, we do very well in Edinburgh. And we've done quite well in the last couple of years, incrementally growing over the last 2 years. And when we went back last year, we had like hundreds of people, and literally hundreds of people in the street like coming up to us and telling us they remember the show and saying hello, and basically just coming up and saying hello like they're old friends. And of course we react, oh my God, hello, so good to see you, so beautiful, look at you. And we play with them. And so it's a really kind of, it's a special kind of work, and it's a real joy to do in Edinburgh. And it's a weird kind of thing, because like we're built for the context of the Fringe in that way, I think. Like it's that the performers, they can go out, we can flyer like nobody else. Every time we come, we bring like a small army of people for what is typical of the Fringe companies, where there's 5 performers. And so there's a real kind of sense of joy and celebration that we can create, which is fantastic. In 2018, when we were there with Don Juan, I was sitting with our producer at the time, and we were hanging out, and she said, oh, this company from China came to see the show, and they want to have a meeting about it. They want to buy the rights, but it's no big deal, whatever, because I mean, obviously they don't want it because it's a weird French thing. And we were like, yeah, okay, that's weird. And she's like, I'll go to the meeting, don't worry about it. And then she went to the meeting with this company, Kaisi Mahua, which is a company based both in Beijing and in Shanghai. And she met with their head of theater and a couple of their producers. And they were very interested in the show, and they saw the show and they loved the show. And they loved the sort of experience and the explosiveness and the relationship that the audience had to the show. And they've been looking at kind of evolving their art form, like their forms, to sort of bring in new forms that aren't really seen in China very often, I think. And so they wanted to buy the rights for the show, and they wanted to buy a script, basically. But we're a very like collaborative company and we're a devised company. And so we basically said, well, we could give you the script, but it wouldn't do you any good and it probably wouldn't make much sense. Large parts of the show are improvised and like, we really work with the performers to be able to play the role and play the game of the show. Anyway, long story short, we went like, we could come over and we could make it with your actors. And so they did. So they brought us over. And in sort of April, May of last year, I believe, 3 of us went over and we created Don Juan, a Chinese Mandarin language version of Don Juan with, there were 9 total performers, the 2 groups, but for 5 in each cast. And we worked for 6 weeks with them. They translated, one of the producers translated the script previously and we went over and we went over kind of going like, having no idea. None of us understand any Mandarin, much less really have any kind of understanding of China, the country or the culture, or the vast amounts of cultures that make it up. And so we kind of started doing research and things like that as best we could in the few months we had before. But really we went over as an experiment. And I kind of went over amazingly terrified. And like having to direct in a language that isn't our own, that we don't understand at all. From a cultural context that is so vastly different to the ones that we were raised in or that we live in now. So I got there and was a bit sort of shell-shocked for the first few days. And, but over the time, really like just came to really love the company. They were fantastic. And we went through, we basically just went, well, we have to do our process. So we worked in our way as best we could and learned how to work with a translator all the time, which is a very interesting experience. And it was beautiful because it slows you down. You have to wait for them to translate. So it's a constant level of stopping and sort of sitting with yourself while you wait. Anyways, we had like completely unexpectedly, basically like we fell in love with everybody. We loved the company. We loved the producers that were working with us. They were fantastic. Actors were great. Our sound designer was lovely. And maybe 2 of the company total out of probably about 20 people spoke English. Maybe about 5, but like were very unconfident in it. And so they would be very reluctant to speak with us. And then we'd get to know them when they'd speak more and more. It was lovely. But the point being, like we made a show together and it sort of looked like our show. Like it sort of looked like the kind of experience. We made the kind of experience that we had. It looks nothing like our show, to clarify. We had to shift context drastically, obviously. Like Don Juan is very much about sexuality and repression and Catholicism and Christianity and its influence on us and making us really repressed, even just historically now, as most people in New Zealand are not, a lot, for the most part, is not a very Christian country, very secular country. And so we're bringing a work made in that context into a Chinese context, which has no Christianity, no Reformation, no Enlightenment, none of those periods that we know have shifted Western or Anglophonic or whatever European civilization so much. And like it was such a massive thing to try to get with them and shift. And there was all the process was we'd have long conversations where we'd have long sessions of working at the form of the show, and then spending long conversations trying to understand what their questions were about the world and what their questions were about how when they feel free and when they feel more repressed or when they feel like restrained and when they feel free. Anyways, it was a whole process of trying to like understand their cultural context and move a work, adapt the work to fit with them. And like we did many showings throughout the process, but had no idea it was going to work. And then on the opening night, it was like an explosive party and there were hundreds of young people and the performers were all really beautiful and performed brilliantly. And the exchange was amazing. And the feeling in the audience was a real party. It was a real kind of celebration. So it was a really beautiful experience. And then from that, we've basically just like a little burgeoning relationship. Like we have a lovely little relationship. And we're developing new ways of working together. So we started collaborating on a project which was roughly based off of an old piece of work that we did in 2007 or 2009, and then but now is like shifting and shifting and shifting to kind of meet their needs and their contexts and things like that. So we were scheduled to go over this year in April, or sort of April through May, June, somewhere in there, to make the show with them after workshopping it here in New Zealand. But we have, of course, had to cancel all of that or postpone all of that. And so we've gone into an extended period of development as we try to, we're going into workshops now off and on, and we were in the workshop actually this week, and then we had new lockdown restrictions in force, so, or it came through, needed to come through. And so we had to cancel, and so we'll postpone those workshops, but we're in a constant kind of dialogue with them about the show, and then we're workshopping it here with our company, and then we'll bring in a playwright remotely, and their producers remotely, and so we'll have a kind of conversation that goes back and forth for the rest of this year, at least for sure, and it's looking probably extending off into next year, depending on what the travel ability is of the world. But yeah, so trying to just like carrying on the development of that, and then eventually, hopefully, a group of us will go back. We'll develop the work here. Their playwright will take it, develop it further, and then we'll go there and create it with their company, with their performers. And it's like it's sort of worked as a test case in a lot of ways. And from Edinburgh this year, and then from some other overseas and international kind of arrangements that we had, we've started to develop conversations with people in South America and people in the United States, with colleagues there about potentially doing a similar kind of thing. There's a couple of universities in America and the United States, and then another couple of kind of producers that tour work around, and sort of looking at the possibility of like creating either a Spanish language version of the show that might tour Latin America, and then even to the United States as well, because there's a huge, obviously, Spanish-speaking market there. And also to make another version of the work that could even be in English language with actors from the United States that would then tour around that region and work within those communities as well. So it's been a kind of process of trying to find partners and working with people to create, to use this form of work, which is very, I think it's a very old form. They are fools in a way. They can say the things very bold and very boldly and very blatantly that we cannot say, but because they're charming and they're crazy and they're funny, we can feel that, and we can sit with that truth and celebrate how difficult things are. So yeah, so that's kind of the gist of that sort of section of work. Obviously, all of the talks with people in North and South America have sort of ceased in the meantime, while everybody tries to scramble to, or at least steady ourselves into finding a way to survive in our own home places. And sort of we've moved into this thing of trying to then evolve a more online kind of presence as well, which is very difficult. And we've just had a previous conversation about this, how you like, unlike this form is so unlike a live form. So after already probably speaking for too much, so the things that we've learned are about like little short bursts of joy, kind of the game that we can deliver in an online way. So we've sort of shrunken the quality, shrunken the length of all of our work, and tried to make little explosive pockets of joy in a way, and try to translate the theatricality that we use in a physical space into somehow using Zoom in an interesting way. So playing with how we adjust the camera, or how we, can do very stupid, simple tricks about like somebody punching me from off, or whatever, stuff like that. Anyway, so that's then the whole other kind of range of work that we're trying to work in an international way, I guess, as well. But I think that's all for me, I guess, at this point.
Thank you, Leo. It's really fantastic to hear the positivity that has come from creating your own practice, and then it's no surprise to me that the Edinburgh context also meant that you were able to forge a new relationship, but also be brave enough to take a leap of faith, because coming from New Zealand across to Edinburgh is a real leap of faith in lots of ways, so that you would have the bravery to work across cultures and languages to create a new work, as you say, that wasn't just a carbon copy of the work that you've made on another company, but it was actually a new process for you, which now possibly may go on to be able to be replicated in other countries with other companies. So thank you very much, Leo. Our second speaker this morning is Julia Croft, one of New Zealand's artists who has regularly presented at the Edinburgh Fringe in recent years. Her newest work, Solo, Working on My Night Moves, was awarded a Total Theatre Award at the 2019 Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Here's some footage from Julia's body of work, and a wee warning here, there is partial nudity in part of this clip.
I've been working my way back to where I started. Are there nonetheless openings that exist within physics that might cover its hegemony, its authority, to shake it to its core, to produce collective imaginaries that undo pervasive conceptions of temporality, that take progress as inevitable, and the past as something that has passed and is no longer with us, in something so tangible, so visceral, that there is a sense that it...
Julia Croft is a live artist and performance maker based in Auckland, New Zealand. Her practice draws on feminist and queer theories to create performance works that explore representational politics, violence, the body, and increasingly feminist futurisms and queer world building. Julia has created 8 full-length works, including 3 solo works, If There's Not Dancing at the Revolution, I'm Not Coming, Power Ballad, and Working on My Night Moves, the latter 2 with Nisha Madden as director and co-creator. Julia is currently creating and developing a solo work with the support of Creative New Zealand, Battersea Arts Centre London and the Marlborough Brighton, and is part of a 3-year arts residency curated by the Basement Theatre New Zealand, Forest Fringe in the UK, and West Kowloon Cultural District. Hi, Julia.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, kia ora tātou. It is a real pleasure to be here with you all, even in this sort of strange digital way to engage a wee bit with the Fringe, because it's my favourite place in the world. So it's nighttime here, so let's all pretend that it's a balmy Scottish evening and it's the Summer Hall courtyard and I have a glass of gin in my hand. So Edinburgh for me has been really nothing but a positive experience, being a live artist, an experimental performance maker, whatever you want to call it. The community of artists working in similar forms to me is like teeny tiny here. So I've always found Edinburgh a really rich source of inspiration as a sort of research and development space, to be able to see work that really blows my mind from artists I deeply respect, to have really robust critical conversations, particularly through my relationship with Total Theatre Network, who have been really boss at creating a space in which there's sort of deeper conversations happening about both the Fringe and the work at the Fringe, and meeting a bunch of sort of allies or partners in crime that feel like there's an international community that's built for that month, that I've found really supportive and has really enriched the work I've made since, I think. So I've been working between New Zealand and internationally since 2015, and I've been really lucky, I guess I've been very lucky to have a situation in which I can develop work in New Zealand and then tour it internationally, or take on residencies internationally. So that was in the before times, and now that life feels sort of really dreamy and perfect and really far away. So I'm sort of grappling, I'm very much in process of grappling with these questions about how to collaborate internationally. Despite what the talk is named, I don't have any clear answers, but I thought I'd just share some of my thinking. So my entire practice is rooted in collaboration. That's with artists here in New Zealand, but also in Australia and Mexico and the UK and Asia, mostly in sort of relationships with other independent artists. I was part of a 3-year residency, as Dolina said, that was run between Forest Fringe, Basement and West Kowloon in Hong Kong. And that was a really beautiful project that CNZ supported, that took 3 artists from each country and allowed us to meet up once a year for 3 years, and sort of design the residency however we wanted. So in the end, it became a really beautiful space of critical conversation about work and the world and our practice, and a space of sort of reflection and a space of support. And one thing, so we'd meet up once a year for 3 years in each of the host countries. And that sort of really shifted my thinking, I think, around international collaboration, because we kept trying to find ways online that we could continue the conversation in the times we weren't together. And we continued to fail at that. So no matter what we tried, it sort of didn't work unless we were in the room together. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot, because all of my collaborations by necessity have happened online in some form, and now it's sort of unclear how long we'll be in the situation we're in now. I'm increasingly thinking about ways my practice can be sort of shifted or modified to be online, in order to sort of maintain those international relationships and also maintain a practice that is internationally focused. And one of the things I've learned is that's really, really, really hard. And sometimes it feels super impossible. And I think part of the reason why I found it so difficult maybe is because I have been trying to transplant the way I would work with a collaborator if we were in a room together, and just put that into an online space, like do all that over Zoom. And for me, that doesn't work. So I guess now I'm in this mode of like searching for ways in which we can think of collaboration differently, or we can collaborate in different ways. Because for me, I think the primary investigations in my work are researches into the live encounter between a performer and an audience, and also through a sort of theory lens, positioning the body, usually my body, as a site of resistance. And both of those things feel mutually exclusive to the sort of digital frame. And I think there is a way in which the digital sort of flattens out complexity and flattens out multiplicity, and both of those are things I'm sort of actively trying to invite into my work. And and this is not to say there's not heaps of value in online spaces, because we're all here having a chat. But for me, I think I need to think a bit deeper about what this new form is, rather than simply digitizing my existing practice. And it occurred to me that I worked in traditional, conventional narrative theatre for a long time before I started making live art. And I think I'm sort of in the same process with the digital, of like having to learn what the rules and modes are and what the powers that are operating in these spaces are before I know sort of how to disrupt that or how to push against that or deconstruct that. And I think I've been thinking a lot about how that also doesn't mean reinventing the wheel, because they're also digital artists. There's a lineage of digital artists working in these spaces that have a rich body of knowledge that we can draw on and mush with our own practice, and it can be sort of something that's really responsive, but acknowledges that there's a tradition that pre-exists us sort of as live artists or hopping online 6 months ago. And so I think while we're doing this sort of collective and individual searching for new ways to work in this new situation, that we're also looking to structures and methodologies to shift to allow sort of collaborations to take place. And some of the things I've been thinking about is like searching for ways we can communicate over distance that are more complex and more embodied than a lot of the ways in which I'm currently engaging with online space. And part of that is, I think, searching for platforms or ways in which I can trouble platforms that feel very corporate. Like I feel like when I'm on Zoom, I'm very aware that it was designed for a corporate context in which a certain kind of communication was necessary, but that's not the way in which I think my work functions. So how can you push against that or make other platforms? And this is like super utopian, right? But how can you also look for platforms that support your politics? Because I think there's something to me quite wild about going, I'll make a radical feminist work, but I'll let Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos profit off the sort of radical work I'm making. In more practical ways, I think also I'm rethinking timelines a lot, or the timelines I'm used to working on, or the timelines I feel like the theatre world encourages us to work on. And like really truly trying to rethink process in a way that honours process as being inherently valuable outside of product. And I feel like that's something that's language that I've thrown around for quite a while. And I'm realising that throwing around language around process and really learning to value it are very different things. That's sort of an active kind of pursuit or engagement for me right now. And I think there's a question of like rethinking what my work even is, and what it serves or who it serves, now that the potential audience is or could be vastly different from what it is in a black box theatre in Edinburgh and New Zealand. So one key thing that popped to mind when this talk came up was that if I'm sure of one thing, it's that international collaborations over distance, mostly online, take so much more time than they do being in a room together. And I think that's sort of on us as artists, but also on funding bodies and venues to expand the timelines in which we're working. And because we're usually in a process, we might think of like working in weeks or months. I think this kind of long-term, long-distance collaboration needs to think in terms of years. I think it also means that support from those same institutions to allow a lot more works to not actually be completed in the way maybe we're used to seeing them completed. I think this way of working, because it's harder to sustain and it's harder to sort of feel people and feel relationship via distance. I certainly have had a lot of attempts at online long distance collaborations that just don't quite see the light of day. And I think that's par for the course, and that needs to be sort of supported and actually valued. And maybe that's part of us, like, or me rethinking process, that not everything needs to have a sort of finished product in the way that maybe I'm used to seeing it. Which I think fundamentally is all sort of all roads head towards anti-capitalism, because I think what I'm pushing against in a lot of ways with this thinking is aligned with a more anti-capitalist way of thinking about art that isn't reverting to thinking about it as a business or a profit or a product, sorry, but also lol, a profit. And I've been thinking about all this and heaps more, because it does seem to me like we're in a moment where radical change is possible in a way it hasn't been, certainly in my lifetime, or I haven't felt it in my lifetime, and that we actually could right now take this moment to reinvent ecosystems that are sort of more aligned to our values. I think it's obviously not a new thought that this current moment has thrown up a lot of problematic politics that are inherent in art institutions and hierarchies, and also the way in which I, as an independent artist, even conceive of my own work and value. So I do think, on the whole, artists that I know here and internationally are doing a shit ton of like really deep thinking about this moment and what is necessary, and what their practice could be and how it could be valuable and responsive, etc., etc. And I think it's really vital that institutions and companies with money and people in power allow or seek out the thinking of artists at this time, and pay them for it. Because also I think there's a tendency to want artists to come up with innovative solves right now, but there's less of an appetite to pay them for their ideas. Because I think that obviously is like, that dynamic is a dynamic that's been inherent in our industry for a really long time, but I think now is the moment where we could pause and rethink, rather than pausing and restarting the industry just how it was with the same problems that existed before. So maybe we could build a system in which artists are, we build a system that doesn't exist on artist free labour, which is, I think, too often the case. And so that's all pretty radical and a bit utopian and a bit woo-woo, but I really do think this is a moment where, if radical change was to happen, it could be now, and we could imagine a new world, and it seems silly to let this opportunity pass without sort of grabbing it with both hands. That's me.
Hi Julia, thanks so much for that fantastic roundup of all your thoughts lately. I have to say that I'm sure there are many, you're one of many artists who regularly come to the Edinburgh Fringe and have an international community, and it's really fantastic to hear the issues that you're grappling with, because I'm sure many others are grappling with those same issues, and you've put some great provocations out there, not only for the artists, but how we as the whole ecosystem of funders, venues, companies and independents might find new ways to work together to create Julia's utopia. So thank you very much for that. Next up is choreographer and artistic director of independent contemporary dance company Foster Group, Sarah Foster-Sproull. Sarah was due to present a new work double goer at Dance Space at the Edinburgh Fringe this year, and she's currently continuing to develop this work with one dancer based in Edinburgh and one in Auckland, New Zealand. Here's a taste of double goer.
The colour rose into her cheeks and she said,
If you were inside the womb and you're both fighting for the same nutrients.
In cases such as these, it is, I believe, the established mode to express a sense of obligation for the sentiments avowed.
So maybe it's more referential to the other person. Like maybe there's, like, that's the only thing you know about. 3 and 4 and 5. Complex twinning. Belly button punch. Yeah. Proteins working together to achieve multiple objectives. So it could sit towards the end of the work as like the final battle. Yeah.
And if I could feel gratitude, I would now thank you. The heart. If I could feel gratitude, but I cannot. I have never desired your good opinion, and you have suddenly bestowed it most unwillingly. I am sorry to have occasioned pain to anyone. It has been most unconsciously done, however, and I hope will be of short duration.
Alongside her work with Foster Group, Sarah Foster-Sproull is also Senior Lecturer in Dance Studies at the University of Auckland and current choreographer in residence at the Royal New Zealand Ballet. She has made choreographic commissions for leading New Zealand dance companies and internationally with Singapore-based THE Dance Company and Guangdong Modern Dance Company in China. Sarah is currently making a dance film with 2 dancers from the New York City Ballet for the New York Choreographic Institute, and she is a resident fellow at the Center of Ballet and the Arts at New York University for 2020 and 2021. Hi Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Hi. Oh gosh. Kia ora. My name is Sarah Foster-Sproull and I'm a proud Aotearoa New Zealand dance maker, academic and mother of 2 children. I'm really honoured to be able to speak on this panel alongside artists and peers that I really respect. We all know each other, and in fact Julia and I are working together at the moment. I want to acknowledge that it's opportunities like this panel that remind me of how interconnected we all are as New Zealanders in the arts, and I think that our strong sense of community is one of our key strengths. I'm in Wellington at the moment. I'm in the office of Artistic Director of the Royal New Zealand Ballet Company, Patricia Barker, trying to look professional. Usually I live in Auckland, and as Dolina mentioned, I work as a choreographer and lecturer at the University of Auckland in the Dance Studies program. I also run independent dance company Foster Group and make contemporary dance and ballet commissions for companies in New Zealand and internationally. There are 3 projects that I'd like to mention on this panel that address my approach to international collaboration amidst a global pandemic. One project is associated with the Edinburgh Fringe, and the other 2 are based in the States. The first project is a live dance show called Double Goal, which was the video that you just had a snippet of a look at. The second project is a digital collaboration with the New York Choreographic Institute, affiliated with the New York City Ballet. And the third project is a research fellowship at the Center for Ballet and the Arts at New York University. Over the next few minutes, I will outline these 3 projects and their themes, and then conclude by providing some personal reflections on the challenges and opportunities of digital international collaboration at a distance. Double Go is a dance project by Foster Group that involves distance rehearsal, international collaboration, live performance and film. To date, it has been researched and developed between New Zealand and Edinburgh, supported by the Creative New Zealand Choreographic Fellowship and Dance Space Edinburgh Artistic Residencies. Double Go is the English translation of doppelganger. It is a physically grueling dance work that chronicles the meeting, battle and potential demise of 2 strikingly similar women. The performers battle for supremacy through acts of competition, wit, physical agility and stamina in a terrain of intricately hand-painted and constructed artifacts that I make myself. The Double Goer is performed by dancer collaborators Tamsin Russell, who's based usually in Edinburgh, and Rose Philpott, based in Auckland. The international collaboration came about through a very lucky meeting with Dance Space Edinburgh's artistic director, Morag Days. She came to New Zealand during festival season, and after seeing some of my choreography, invited me to conduct an artist residency at Dance Space. The plan was to develop Double Goer with an aim to perform it at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year, but that did not happen. So yeah, we had to rethink things. In response to the pandemic, Creative New Zealand enabled artists here to apply for funding to rethink our creative projects within the new COVID context. As such, I'm now completing Double Goer for performance through using a Zoom rehearsal process. With Auckland in lockdown, this means all rehearsals are conducted over Zoom in different locations and different time zones, which is an interesting sort of challenge in itself. After we have completed the live show content for the full-length work, I will edit the dancers together from their different locations into one cohesive, hopefully a short film. The whole project requires a lot of creativity, administration, planning, and responsiveness to change. Foster Group is negotiating collaborators, shifting work, home and life schedules, and shifting alert level lockdowns in New Zealand and Scotland. Our focus is on scheduling flexibility and resilience to change, alongside providing care and support for my collaborators, who are also my really good friends. The second project is a film called Fever Dream. Earlier this year, the artistic director of the New York Choreographic Institute, Adrienne Danchig-Waring, approached me about a virtual residency session choreographing on 2 dances from the New York City Ballet. The New York Choreographic Institute was looking for innovative ways to continue their creative practice within the confines of the pandemic. The idea was to make something over a few days on Zoom, after which the dancers would film the material and send it to me for editing. I've been thinking about what a surreal, mad experience this year has been so far, where around every corner is a new curveball or challenge. So to reflect this chaos and to play with the tensions, confusions, and possibilities of surreal imagery, the film explores a New York fever dream. It follows 2 women cascading through surreal experiences, falling in and out of choreographic sequences with matches and apples and knives and a swimming pool and so on, all the while trying to clutch each other for security. So far, I've rehearsed the material over Zoom, and the dancers Eliza Black and India Bradley have filmed content with the help of Darius Black, India's partner. My long-term collaborator and friend Eden Mulholland made the music, which is full of pop-like drums and sad piano and the element of surprise with a banjo. And now I'm at editing stage. So by way of reflection, here are some things I'm negotiating with this project. The first thing is, it's a really big honor to be asked to make this work for the New York Choreographic Institute. New York City ballet dancers are very good, astounding, and I feel like I'm sort of representing New Zealand in some sort of choreographic Olympics. And I know that it's not that, but that's a little bit of what it feels like. The process was fast and the time zones were different, which makes for a lot of coffee drinking. I think maybe sort of 4 or 5 cups of coffee of a morning. My accent was sometimes hard to understand for the dancers, and I speak quite fast, which I'm trying to moderate in this conversation. The dancers have bell and chain training from the States. Mine is from the Royal Academy of Dance and contemporary dance from Aotearoa. Therefore, our language, our lineage, and terminology is all different. Sound playback was kooky. Zoom often incurs a delay. I couldn't count the dancers in, and the music either compresses or the sound drops out in playback. So that was a significant challenge in rehearsing over Zoom for us. And finally, my shot list for the film was very ambitious, and I'll probably regret the scale of my ambition in the edit. Learning to translate my ideas into digital form is now an essential part of my creative practice, and I was very lucky that the dancers in the process were open-minded, deeply talented, intelligent, and responsive to my sometimes surprising creative requests. The final project I'd like to talk about is a fellowship at the Centre for Ballet and the Arts at New York University. Last year, I applied for this fellowship, which involved a comprehensive application process through which 12 international fellows were selected. My idea for the fellowship is to work on creating a gender-neutral dance partnering language built from contemporary dance creative techniques for a balletic paradigm. Thematically, I'm going to research the intersections between quantum theories of entanglement to explore the synergies between quantum physics, ballet, and the moving body in contact. I'll be conducting a research period online. If I'm not allowed to travel, I'll be conducting a research period online. If this is the case, I'll be looking at ways to entangle bodies without touch, but through sound, movement design, rhythm, and performative focus. That's yet to be figured out at the moment. I recognise that this international opportunity allows space for lots of deep focused research, time to think and play outside of my comfort zone and meet peers in diverse arts fields from across the world. It also offers the possibility to make work in New York, or if COVID prevents that, to make work in New York while living in New Zealand. If this is the case, I'm aware that some challenges of the project may involve fatigue with the digital platform, issues with connecting to others in different time zones, working at unusual hours, keeping communication consistent, and remaining creative. Through the 3 projects I've talked about, I see that there are a number of opportunities and challenges in connecting through distance collaboration in an international sense. I'll briefly outline these things. Firstly, from my experiences, what I recognise is that institutions and artists seem more open-minded about connecting online than ever before. I feel that there is an opportunity to reach out, to make suggestions and form relationships where previously the doors might have been closed. In addition to this, our creative processes are transforming in response to our conditions. Some artists are really thriving, however, others are exhausted, and we have to go gently with care and sensitivity, as it's not all about productivity and creative output. And finally, because of the shifting contexts we are negotiating, additional thought needs to be invested into how intellectual property, copyright, and attribution is embraced within collaborative arts processes utilising digital terrain. I'm currently looking at how my online dance making might more effectively reflect the collaborative nature of our Zoom processes to honour the contributions of the dancers in legally meaningful ways. In conclusion, I think at the moment that I am living the challenge of dissonance within my work. As an artist, I have a vested interest in remaining dynamic and responsive to change for my community, my collaborators, my whānau, my students, and for my choreographic practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. You have raised some very interesting issues about the process over Zoom and two very different processes that you were talking about there. One with two dancers that you know incredibly well, and then another one with dancers who you've never met in person. And so that whole notion of choreographing with the body without being able to see or feel the body is probably very unusual for both of you. So it's wonderful to hear the different journeys that you're on. And also just a reminder to everybody that the artists that we're working with are people, and we're all going through a worldwide pandemic. And it's great to hear, Sarah, you talk about that kind of consideration and pastoral care that you're offering to the collaborators you're working with as well. So thank you. Our final panelist for this morning is Jamie McCaskill. Jamie is in high demand in New Zealand as a writer, director, actor and musician for both his own company Tikapa Productions and other companies. He will be talking about international Indigenous collaboration. Jamie's work has a work that was written in collaboration with Aboriginal playwright Nathan Maynard from Tasmania, Australia, which is premiering in 2021. Here is some background on Jamie and Nathan and their project Hide the Dog.
I'm Nathan Maynard. I'm a Tūraloa man from Larapona country, Lutruwita, Tasmania.
My name is Jamie McCaskill. I live in Wellington. My tribes are Ngati Tamatera, Te Haunui Paparangi, Ngā Puhi.
Me and Jamie are the same in the sense that, you know, we love our theatre, we love our, you know, telling stories, but it's, you know, but we love our culture and we use our theatre to tell our stories. You know, we're both very much cultural men. And
I think a family story about educating in a light way, an easy way about our cultures is exciting.
Blackfellas in Tassie, we really, you know, connected with the Māori mob that come to Tassie. And I think it's because Tassie's such a white place that it was just a natural friendship already there. And, you know, obviously we share stories of colonisation and invasion.
Jamie's company, Tikapa Productions, is an award-winning independent production company based in Wellington, New Zealand. Tikapa is committed to creating high-quality entertainment and promoting social justice. They brought their acclaimed show Not in Our Neighbourhood to Edinburgh in 2018. Tikapa Productions are also the creators of the highly sought-after Māori show band, the Māori Sidesteps, who have a successful web series here and also just completed filming on their first television show. Kia ora, Jamie.
Kia ora, Dao. Tuia ki te waitapu nui o tāne. Tāne te pukenga, tāne te waiora, tāne te tokarangi, putu ki te whaiau, ki te ao mārama, tihei mauri ora. Kia ora and hello. I wasn't swearing at anyone. My name is Jamie McCaskill and I'm a director of an independent theatre company in Wellington, New Zealand called Tikapa Productions, and director of a live multimedia entertainment company called the Māori Sidesteps. Thank you to Creative New Zealand for inviting me tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I attended the Fringe in Edinburgh Fringe in 2018 with two shows. One was called Not in Our Neighbourhood. It's a show about survivors living in a women's refuge safe house, and the other show was called The Moor Show. It was a psychedelic solo show about a racist Kiwi and three lonely men from a small town New Zealand pub who meet in an underworld and repent to a giant bird called a moa. As an artist, I've worked mostly in what is termed in New Zealand Māori theatre. Māori theatre is a syncretic type of theatre that uses the Western form of theatre with a Māori agenda. And for those who don't know, Māori are the Indigenous people of New Zealand. As an oral people, like many cultures, storytelling is a vital part of our culture. And here they're referred to as pūrākau. And these stories trace our family lineage back to our ancestors who travelled to the shores of New Zealand from a place called Hawaii. Māori theatre started taking off in New Zealand in the 60s and then really boomed in the 90s and has continuously evolved since then. And this has led to collaborating with other Indigenous artists in Australia, Canada, Hawaii, and other Indigenous cultures around the world. My most recent collaboration, you saw the video, was with a Tasmanian Palawa writer called Nathan Maynard on a show called Hide the Dog. And Hide the Dog follows an Aboriginal girl named Niara and a Māori boy called Te Umuroa. And they stumble across a Tasmanian tiger, which is a kind of a wolf-like, it's called a lithocene. It's now extinct. And they stumble across the last one and decide to hide it in New Zealand. So these two young kids make a hybrid canoe inspired by both of their cultures and sail to New Zealand to hide it. And the show premieres in Sydney next year. And COVID dependent, it goes to a few other festivals around Australia. Now I'm writing a satire about an English man who searches his New Zealand roots and discovers he's related to a highly skilled Māori battalion that changed the outcomes of famous battles during the New Zealand Land Wars in the 1800s. And I'm currently talking to an independent production company in London about developing it for a UK audience, which is real exciting. With COVID, if anything, collaborating via Zoom has made my international collaboration much more accessible and in a way acceptable. I mean, nothing beats being in the same room, but just learned to try and be flexible and not precious of the usual way of working and get my way through it that way. Most importantly for me, Indigenous collaboration is a way to unite Indigenous cultures, to compare and relate stories, to understand and listen to similarities, and through collaboration, make the Indigenous voice louder and stronger, because in a world of divisive politics, conspiracy theories, autocracy, Indigenous voices are becoming more relevant, but are being more sedated. So that's all I have to give tonight. So I look forward to the discussions tonight, and I hope I can contribute to the panel. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jamie, thank you. It's really wonderful to hear about the different Indigenous collaborations that have been happening internationally, certainly over the last certainly the last 10 to 20 years. Artists have been travelling in particular to writing festivals such as Yalamundi in Sydney, which is run by Mugalin Theatre, and to a writer's workshop that Native Earth runs in Canada, and also to a writer's workshop in New Zealand called Breaking Ground. And we're always really interested in the way that we can position Indigenous theatre in the Edinburgh context. And last year I was really interested to see the Indigenous contemporary scene, which was curated, I think, by Emily Monette, which from Canada, as perhaps a really interesting platform to develop, to be able to share in the future, subject to travel abilities, or perhaps even in the online space, context for presenting Indigenous work in the Edinburgh Fringe context. So thank you very much to all of our panelists for your presentations and sharing this evening. We've got about another 25 minutes left on our panel. So anybody who's there in the webinar who would like to ask a question, please do send it through. I have one question already come through, which I'd like to put to our panelists, and this is on an issue which is very important to and concerns many of us, climate change. So a question we have here is, do climate change concerns make you feel you will continue to pursue the approaches you've developed during coronavirus to reduce flights, etc.? Might just throw that out to you, Julia, you've been doing a lot of international travel.
Yeah, and feeling terribly guilty about it the whole time. Yeah, I think that that's sort of where my feeling is like, this isn't just a holding pattern, but, you know, this is maybe not the new normal, but I don't think it's ever going to go back to how it was, certainly in the choices I was making around international travel, but I think in the way the whole industry organises itself, because it's felt to me like those conversations around sustainability and air travel have been bubbling around that festival world for a while, and they felt very present in Edinburgh last year. So I think it's not going back to the same level of travel, and that's for artists and presenters and you know, all the sort of the food cart people, like that affects everyone. I mean, I'd hope there's sort of a happy medium, because also, you know, living in an island at the bottom of the world can make you feel real disconnected. So, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's going to shift a bit.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue for us in Aotearoa New Zealand, being so far away. It literally is miles and miles and miles and 24 hours at least to get to the other side of the world.
But I think there's also, I mean, I don't know the stats on this, but also the online space isn't carbon neutral either. You know, there's also, you know, our data has a carbon footprint. Our use of social media has a carbon footprint. So I think it's also not saying it's not a, you know, one or the other or binary choice, but to be aware that also our online lives have real consequences in terms of climate change also.
Thanks, Julia. I know that presenters and venues and festivals have also been having this conversation about climate change in terms of how they can collaborate and work together to present artists, so that artists don't have to travel necessarily for one-off gigs, but be able to be part of a longer experience overseas, I guess, automatically to cut down on those climate change issues. Sarah, Leo, or Jamie, do any of you have anything you'd like to add or have thought about in terms of the climate change and travel?
I just want to, agree, support Julia's statements, but also maybe from an employer's perspective, like bringing dancers into the country from international destinations feels way off in the distance for me now, and I'm getting really comfortable with that, and just investing deeply in the, you know, in projects that I'm making here in Aotearoa, just investing really deeply in the relationships that are here, and that we can find time to see each other where possible, because it sort of seems in some ways that a lot of the work at the moment is about keeping people safe and looking after sort of well-being and safety and investing in the community around, as well as it is about the purpose of this panel, which is international collaboration and whatnot. So yeah, that's my perspective.
Thanks, Sarah. I've got another question here, which I'll put to you first, Jamie. As experienced practitioners, this person would love to know if you have thoughts and advice for our rangatahi, which means young people, and emerging artists who are just starting out navigating their careers in this new normal.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. I've been talking to a lot of kind of younger artists and working with a lot of younger artists kind of post-COVID, and them really feeling the confidence to tell their stories that have influence and have a place in this platform of storytelling. I mean, like I think, like people have said to me, and then I've said to everybody, just keep on telling your stories. Everybody's got a really unique voice. In terms of rangatahi in New Zealand, yeah, we're all here to support Just believe in yourself. Yeah, it's a good time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jamie. Leo, I'll come to you with the same question. What thoughts and advice would you have for emerging artists who are just starting out at this time, at this difficult time?
Yeah. Like, oh, wow. I don't know what I can say. I just agree with like what the other three have said. Like talk to people that are around, get local, tell your story. Like, you know, like that's the beautiful impetus that we have now, and especially in New Zealand, where we're so lucky that, you know, our government's doing something that's good about this thing. And in so many other places in the world, we see that it's not happening. And so we have such a beautiful opportunity here to be burdened with having to go down to like a level 3 lockdown or whatever that means. You know, anyways. But we're also then really blessed with the fact that like we're small, we can act fast, and we can kind of like in a closed border situation, we can have shows and we can have meetings, and we can be together in a room, and we can collaborate, and you can actually be in a room together, which is a beautiful thing. Like they were saying, nothing beats that. So like take this opportunity, I think, to sort of like, I think it's beautiful if we can really take this opportunity, all of us, to get local, get with each other, talk to people, because like the beautiful thing about New Zealand that I've always found is like you can kind of call anybody up and they'll talk to you. You can email anybody, and you can kind of get a meeting with kind of anybody, and have a meaningful conversation if you ask. So like, do that. Go ask people. You know, it's a very small industry, as it is globally, as we're here globally in a small community, but still global. But here is especially accessible, and it's a beautiful thing to kind of be able to be focused, to need to be focused on being together in this way right now here as well.
Thank you, Leo. I think that's very true. You can bring anyone up here for a coffee or a coffee via Zoom, and they will make the time to have that with you. And that goes for global relationships too. So anybody out there from across the world, if you want to talk to any of these artists tonight, their contact details were on the front slide. So at the end of this webinar, you can whip back to the start and find their emails and reach out to any of them. Sarah, as you're a tutor at University of Auckland, I just wanted to throw that question to you as well, because I'm sure you've been having lots of conversations like Jamie with young people or people who are students and about to emerge into the world of being an artist. What advice have you got for young people at this time?
I taught postgraduate choreography and undergraduate contemporary dance technique in all of semester 1 on Zoom. And I learned a lot through that experience. The main thing that I learned about the student experience is that they need more time to check in individually with their lecturers and to have reassurance and support that's stepping beyond just the academic support and physical learning content that they might be getting from their classes. It's actually really very important for us to connect on a personal level with our students, and particularly in an arts context, we need to get to know our students on a personal level so that we can support their practice as much as possible. So in some ways I found that I started to get to know my students a lot better, which I really enjoyed, but I also recognized that they had a lot of challenges. It's incredibly difficult to learn academically over Zoom, especially when you're a tactile human being that requires physical contact and builds relationships in person. Like, it's deeply challenging for some students, even to maintain consistent attendance at classes was really challenging for some students because of shifting family concerns, pressures to go and work and to bring money in for the family. Our students are so incredibly diverse in the dance studies department at the University of Auckland that we had to take an individualized approach to every student and look from a personal perspective at their conditions. So I think it enhanced the working, like the level of working by probably 100%. Like, the hours were crazy, but the student well-being was way more important than the hours we were working.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll come to a new question now. With inevitable new and unexpected local additional lockdowns and second, third spikes in the virus, which will happen globally, how do the panel feel that this will affect long-term touring, programming and planning? There's more to this question. How will that then affect funding, budgeting, etc.? And do the panel feel that it will mean international touring will become quite last minute and potentially get cancelled last minute? I know, for example, that in New Zealand, we had a short, sharp shock last week when we suddenly were thrown back into lockdown across the country, and several shows that were good to go were cancelled at the very last minute just here with local companies. So I might come to you first, Leo, because with the work that you've been developing with China and then potentially with South America, have you even been able to think about long-term, or are you just in the moment? What's your thoughts on that question?
I think it's very curious. It's like we're scheduled, actually at this point, we're scheduled to tour Australia in April through June of next year. And it's basically just a transplanted tour that we managed to move over, our agent managed to move over from this year. So, and in May, that felt like a really good idea. And now it's kind of like we're like with, especially once Victoria went into like lockdown again, it was kind of like, okay, well maybe that's even too soon, you know. So now, I have no answer for that. Like, it's a kind of completely. We have a show that's supposed to go up in Wellington at the beginning of September in 2 weeks, and we haven't even advertised it yet because we didn't know until today that we were really going to do it. So now it's just kind of like, I mean, and these are problems that we have here, but like, you know, in the United States, in so many other places in the world, like it's just not even an issue. So it's a weird kind of like idiosyncratic kind of position to be in. I think something about like being able to be fast, but also and to change quickly, but like it only goes so far because you have to book hotel rooms or Airbnbs, or you have to book flights, or you have to like, it's dependent on so much financial kind of arrangement. I don't really know.
Thank you, Leo.
I just basically said, I don't know in 5 minutes.
I'll throw to you, Julia, in terms of your kind of planning. How are you planning for international live performance? Are you in any way at all, or are you totally kind of focused on how you might make a digital space work for you in your process?
No, I am sort of, I loosely think about the future, but that sort of has become something more challenging. And it felt to me initially when this whole thing hit, like as an artist, really, I felt very strongly my job was sort of just to live through it before you started making plans out of it. So I've slowed right down, but hopeful that in 2021, that maybe we'll be able to leave. I think my major feeling, and I'm not always just throwing everything to institutions, just to be clear, but I think that is kind of a more institutional and structural question, because I think as an independent artist, I don't know, we're hella used to being nimble. Like I can be there tomorrow if you want. I can chuck it in a suitcase and we can just go. What do you want to show in 20 minutes? I'm ready. So I think that's more on like funding bodies to have allowance for that in budgets, and venues to have a bit more transparency about their planning and their timelines. So it's less of a sense of people being able to turn around and say yay or nay at the last minute, but maybe it's an ongoing transparent conversation between funders, artists and presenters. But I think in this moment of change, I think there's a really lovely sense of the lines between those sort of presenters, venues and funders and artists feel a little bit more amorphous and less hierarchical than they used to. So I feel like there's a lot of potential just to have open and honest conversations about this boat, we're all in, and a bit of allowance and kindness for one another if things trip over or we screw things up, or, you know, that kind of thing.
That's great. Thank you, Julia.
Delina,
And now
can
just
I-
a little bit, questions come in about the local context, what's happening in New Zealand. And there's a question here for the panel, from the panel's knowledge of what is happening in New Zealand. Are venues and festivals planning on programming local content for most of 2021? And is there enough content? Will it have a long-term positive impact on the local sector, do you think, in terms of local companies scaling up? I'll throw that to whoever wants to answer that question.
I just want to say that there is so much content. There's so much great content here. Absolutely, we can populate festivals. It's not really a question of that. That's my statement.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a great statement. And do you guys have a sense that you know what local venues and festivals are planning for 2021?
I don't. Does anyone else?
Well, it feels like people are getting ready or programming for work, but you know, things have changed, you know, just so dramatically in the last week. You know, Carly, my partner, and I had just been out of work, or she was in work starting Sunday and now out of work straight away. So even people who didn't think there was going to be a second coming of this pandemic, you know, theatres included, festivals probably included, probably just a little bit of a jolt. So I think we're all wondering what's going to be happening next year. I think with festivals and local content, my main concern is that when local product gets commissioned or gets programmed, that we don't get paid a lower wage for doing what we do, as well as the rest of the world. That's one of my main worries. I know that we're all struggling for money, but you know, we want to be paid for our caliber. I just want to go back to that last question, Dol, if I can. With the touring thing, like my play opens in Sydney next year. I've been working on it for 3 years and been really looking forward to that opening night drink, but I can't go. So my co-writer's going to be there by himself watching, because I can't go over and check out opening night. But also another thing in terms of a cultural collaboration, probably they're not going to have any Māori actors or Māori cultural advisors over there at the same time. So there's a little bit of kind of skewing to do when it comes to cultural collaboration and how much we can influence from online or actually being there in person to feel the piece and to take part in that collaboration. So, you know, a lot of that kind of cross-cultural collaboration is going to be affected with international touring, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point, Jamie. Thank you very much. Now, we've only got 5 minutes left on the panel. I've got a 1-minute question for you to answer, Leo, and then I'll wrap it up and throw back to Amy Saunders from the Fringe Society team. My question for you, Leo, has come in about how do we secure our culture safety in the work if there is censorship in China? So I'm sorry, I've only given you 1 minute to answer this really great question. Maybe just tell us how you coped with censorship with your play, which all your plays are always very sexy. Sexy is the word in the play.
We just we basically like let our partners lead us. So we were like, you tell us this is your, you know, like we don't understand why anything is censored or what it is, and they couldn't really explain necessarily why stuff was either. Some stuff very obviously, but like so we just followed their lead and really kind of nothing came up that I was like, we can't shift that because it's integral to the show. I'm happy to chat further about this, whoever asked this question, if you just message me or email me or whatever, because it's a long conversation. It was like quite an interesting thing to work with. But, yeah.
Fabulous, thank you, Leo. So yes, please, I think that question came in from Fred. Hi, Fred, please do get in touch with Leo for a further chat about that. Well, I'd like to just say thank you very much to all of you who joined us here today. A big thank you to our panelists, Leo, Julia, Sarah and Jamie. Thank you to the team from the Fringe Exchange, to Creative New Zealand, Auckland Live and Pans behind the scenes. If you'd like to know more about our artists, do get in touch with them. Contact details on the front slide. And to find out more about Creative New Zealand's international programs and opportunities, or to stay engaged with what's happening in New Zealand with our artists, please visit creativenz.govt.nz. Now, before I throw over to Amy, I'd just like to close our session today with a short prayer in Te Reo Māori, which is New Zealand's Indigenous language and an official language here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Kia hora te marino, may the calm be widespread. Kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, may the ocean glisten as greenstone. Kia tere te kai rohi rohi I mua I tō huarahi. May the shimmer of light ever dance across your pathway. Have a safe and happy week. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll throw over to Amy. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thanks, Dolina. That was beautiful, and I almost don't want to speak because that was such a lovely ending. But just a very brief thank you to Creative New Zealand and Auckland Live, Dolina for hosting that, to the panel for sharing your thoughts, and I think reminding us all, as I think Julia said, you know, to be kind. And I think that what this process is hopefully doing is it feels like it might be removing some of those walls that have existed before traditionally between institutions and artists, and allowing a more honest conversation. And I remember I was actually in Auckland when the virus kind of hit in the middle of the Auckland festival, like feeling bereft because you could just see what was going to happen, and that we are going to be in and out of these lockdowns, I think, for the next wee while, and that we all just need to look after each other and look out for each other, and funders and institutions do have a responsibility to make sure that artists in this period of hiatus, that there is some sense of care there, and hopefully we will find a new norm going forward. But in the meantime, to be caring and kind to each other, and to keep holding hands, I guess, metaphorically speaking, and supporting each other through this time. So thank you to all of you for sharing your thoughts. I think there are a few questions there that weren't answered, so if people want to get in touch directly, please feel free. There's more events coming up. Made in Scotland, I've got a similar event on Wednesday, which is going to be exploring the way that Scottish artists are working throughout COVID, and there's a session next Monday with Swiss artists, and looking at some of the initiatives that those artists are doing in lieu of live performances. So for those that want to learn more, please tune in. Thanks again. Have a good day. Have a good evening. All the best. Bye-bye.